to drop into that mountain was one of the scariest things I'd done at the time. But then the feeling of overcoming that fear when you be brave and you find that courage to overcome that fear, the feeling of being so proud of yourself for pushing past that fear was addictive. It was something I wanted to do again and again. And my brother and I have talked about this many times. We're not fearless. We feel the fear, but we love the feeling that you get after you actually overcome that fear and do what you really wanted to do, even if it scares the hell out of you.
How do people like us, with a drive to excel and a belief in our own agency, navigate life's complexities? How do we sift through the vast sea of knowledge to find actionable insights in areas like habits, health, wealth, and relationships? Come with me as I interview intellectuals and all-stars to refine life's ungoogleable lessons. I save you time and effort by finding the best of life's messy questions in this podcast to give you the answers. My name is Blake Bottrell, and this is the Distilled Podcast. My guest today, by my calculations, is on about life 6 out of 9, between a polar bear attack, an avalanche, crevasses, spinal fusion, and brain surgery. She's no stranger to extreme sports and has been skiing since the age of 3. 45 years later, she won the Australian Women's National Kite Surfing Championship. Today, she splits her time between Alaska, the Pacific Northwest, and her home country of Australia. Her nomadic lifestyle allowing her to maximize the time pursuing the activities that make her feel most alive. Jennie Milton, welcome to the show.
Hi, Blake. How you going? It's great to be here chatting with you and to your audience today. Thanks so much for having me.
What is Alaska Backcountry Adventures?
Alaska Backcountry Adventures was actually the name of the heli-ski operation that I first ever went to make my dream come true of skiing and snowboarding those big mountains that you see in the movies. And I haven't heard that name, Alaska Backcountry Adventures, for a while because that operation has since changed names and owners and things like that. But boy, there's some great memories pop up when you mention that name.
What is the memory that most sticks out in your mind?
I think the memory that sticks out most in my mind is actually going there and meeting these incredible heli-ski guides, these backcountry guides, these avalanche specialists that actually live the lifestyle that me as a retailer selling skis and snowboard just dreamed about. And these badass women and these incredible guys that keep you safe on the mountain really opened my eyes of a different life that you can live. And there was one in particular that I was quite attracted to. He was a pretty cute one. And we started chatting and he had wind sports in common with me. We were both into snow sports, but also wind sports. And I was telling him that after coming to Alaska to go heliboarding, I was going to Hawaii to learn how to kiteboard. And he mentioned he had a kite also. And we went out there in the parking lot at ABA, they called it, Alaska Backcountry Adventures, and we flew our kites with our snowboards on and started to get towed around. And that day, I totally fell in love with Alaska. I fell in love with this new sport of flying a kite on snow, and I also fell in love with that sexy heli-ski guide. His name's Steve, and we've now been married for over 16 years.
You've kind of devoted your entire life to action sports, more or less at this point, whether it be, like you say, on the retailer side or now on the adventure side. Where did that conviction come from?
That conviction came from my parents. My dad was a sailor. He was a skier, and he really brought my brother and I up into this sporty lifestyle. They had a sports store from when I was born. So there's pictures of me before I could even walk in a basket under the counter of my mum and dad's sports store in Australia. And they were all about always having the latest and greatest thing that was coming out. And as we all know, there's always a new toy, a new sport that's coming out. And I had such a lucky upbringing of being involved in all these sports and being the first kid on the block to try rollerblading and the first kid on the block to get a kite and things like that. So I really believe a lot of this came from my dad. He would take my brother and I on skiing holidays in the wintertime. He would take us out on his yacht off the east coast of Australia, and we'd sail up and down the east coast of Australia. So we got into wind sports and sailing, and really having a sport for every season and every type of weather was his philosophy.
Were there any of those toys that you didn't get a chance to pursue that you might have in a different life?
I actually got to try most of them, but I'll be honest with you, Blake, I don't think I've told anyone this for a long time, but he had one of the first skateboard stores in Australia way back in the 70s, and my brother and I got into skateboarding. I remember all the kids in our street were skateboarding, but one day I remember sitting down on this skateboard with no shoes, bare feet, and getting way too fast, putting my feet down and taking skin off my feet, ending up face planting and taking skin off my nose. And that experience as a young girl kind of turned me off skateboarding at a young age. So I never really got back into the skateboarding thing. And I ended up being, that rollerblader, fruit booter, they call them.
What were the best lessons that you learned from the years in transitioning from working on the retail side to living this adventure side? There were some years there where you got the chance to be a ski bum and live on resorts and live the lifestyle of a skier and really sort of nestle into that community.
I think the difference was that I went from talking about it to actually doing those sports and realizing that I had a lot to learn. I knew a lot about all the products that we used, very technical, bit of a MacGyver. I could fix anything. And I knew what clothes to wear in order to stay warm in the cold mountains of Alaska. So as an Aussie girl, I was wearing the right stuff, had all the gear, but I didn't really have a lot of that backcountry knowledge. And where I think I differed as a ski bum to many other ski bums is that I wasn't living the resort lifestyle, going from resort to resort. I was actually up in Alaska where there were no chairlifts. There was no resort. And so learning the safety and the mindset that's required to become a backcountry skier and snowboard was fascinating. It was scary, and I had a lot to learn. So I really needed to be open to learning. And I'm so grateful that I got to learn from some of the best in the business. I mean, as I mentioned, those guys up in Alaska, those heli-ski guides have so much knowledge. And it's not the knowledge you can just learn in books or by doing an avalanche class. It actually comes down to experience and really getting in tune with the mountain and understanding the weather and getting that sixth sense about whether it's safe to go out or not and where's the right place to go. So the backcountry aspect of skiing and snowboarding was fantastic for me to get into. And it was at the early days of backcountry too, back before everybody was getting into skins and split boards like they are these days.
Yeah, I have a couple of friends that recently moved out to Kelowna in BC from the Toronto area here. And part of their new favorite activities now is doing a little bit of backcountry stuff off of the resorts that are there in Kelowna or across the provincial line into Alberta. So they're living their best life out there for sure. And it looks more fun than I can imagine. So
it's so much fun being away from the people, being away from the resorts, and really getting in tune with Mother Nature and the mountains. It's really incredible. And it's amazing the life lessons that we learn out there. When we do our avalanche classes, there's a whole section on the human factor. And that is about making smart decisions, not letting our desire to do something overpower our observation of seeing red flags or dangers out there on the mountain. And so I'm so grateful for all the lessons that I've learned in the mountains, not just for my sport, but for actually living my life and the things that we have to go through as we age and deal with as life changes.
Part of that, making sure that you're experiencing all of that. I have a quote from you here that says, "Stop watching your kite, look away and check out the incredible view." How often do you have to remind people that when you're teaching them?
A lot. I love teaching people to kite, both on water when they're learning to kiteboard and also on snow. But the first thing that beginners do is look up at the kite, and they're flying the kite and they're looking at it, and they're getting a sore neck because they're looking at the kite. And so I love telling people to look away from the kite, look where we're going, enjoy the view. And once they figure out that they can fly the kite with feel and not with looking at it, it's a huge jump in their progression.
We've mentioned a couple times that you sort of come by this pursuit of sport, honestly. Your parents own the ski shop, like you talked about. Your brother's actually a Paralympic gold medalist. What has your family taught you most about sport other than the introduction?
Boy, my brother has been my biggest inspiration my whole life. He lost his leg when he was 9 years old and had to overcome dealing with becoming an amputee. And one of the first things that my dad did as soon as my brother was able, he was still having chemotherapy, was Dad got Michael into some disabled skiing lessons and learning how to use outriggers and ski on one ski. A lot of amputees use an artificial leg, but because my brother lost his when he was 9 years old, and back then the technology isn't like it is today, they had to actually amputate it up high next to the hip, so he didn't have a good stump for moving that artificial leg. So he does everything on one leg. He's incredible. Don't accept a race on crutches with my brother. He's a world record holder on his crutches too. But watching my brother adapt all of these different types of sporting equipment that came in and figuring out a way of doing these sports and adapting the equipment was fun. It was fascinating, and it really taught me to be a MacGyver and to believe that there's a way of doing anything if we really want to. People ask him the question, what can't you do? And his answer used to be ballroom dancing and running hurdles. And he was actually on that show Dancing with the Stars, and they taught him how to ballroom dance. So now his answer is hurdles is the only thing he can't do. And really that attitude of my brother's has really infected me as well, is there's nothing we can't do. We just need to find out the skills, learn from somebody who's a great instructor and coach, and put in the time and the experience and figure out what equipment is right for us. And again, that was what Dad taught us in the ski shop, is there's not one pair of skis for everybody. We have to find the skis that actually suit our style and our body weight and what we're wanting to do. So really adapting and believing that I can do anything if I really want to was the lesson that my brother taught me, and he still inspires me so much to this day.
It seems like there's a lesson there from Dad too, a little bit about a sort of get back on the horse mentality. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges, especially when you're 9 years old and going through chemotherapy. I can only imagine. But how has that been instilled in you? I know you've gone through numerous setbacks in your own life and have bounce back as strong or stronger from each one.
A lot of people think when they see my Instagram and they hear about all of the extreme sports that I do, that I must have been a natural sports person or born this way, my brother and I. But I look back at when I was a little girl and I can literally say I was a scaredy cat. I was that kid at school who had to go up and dive off the dive board and being so embarrassed because I climbed back down. I was too scared to do it. And many times when I turn around and ran, my natural reaction of flight started at a young age and running away. I had a lot of fear. So if we look at how I was when I was a little girl and to where I am now, it's a huge difference. And that's something that I've learned to do by overcoming fears. And Alaska taught me that the first time I got that helicopter to the top of the mountain and I got out and I was like, yeah, I'm just like in the movies. It's like, well, be careful what you wish for because it might just happen. And what I didn't realize is how scared I was actually going to be. And there was no running around. That helicopter had gone. And so to face that fear, which was so extreme, and to drop into that mountain was one of the scariest things I'd done at the time. But then the feeling of overcoming that fear when you be brave and you find that courage to overcome that fear, the feeling of being so proud of yourself for pushing past that fear was addictive. It was something I wanted to do again and again. And my brother and I have talked about this many times. We're not fearless. We feel the fear, but we love the feeling that you get after you actually overcome that fear and do what you really wanted to do, even if it scares the hell out of you.
Why is Bigfoot so important in your life?
Bigfoot. I'm actually in my Bigfoot RV right now. It's the brand of my RV, which was built in Canada, and I love RVs. I've been an RV girl for a long, long time. In fact, when I sold my retail store, it was called Adrenajen Sports. When I sold that back in 2002, I didn't know what to do with my life, but I knew that I had to go back to Alaska. I had to find myself. I discovered that having a retail store was my parents' dream and something that I thought they wanted me to follow in their footsteps. And so I decided I would take 12 months off and I would fly to Seattle with my mountain bike and my snowboard in a box, and I would buy myself an RV. And I bought that RV and I drove all the way up to Alaska. I drove every road I possibly could and made so many of my bucket list dreams come true. And I did that on my own. I spent a lot of time on my own, and that time was so special to me because I really discovered who I was, what I wanted to do, who I wanted to hang out with, and I really started to enjoy hanging out with myself. So I can very happy being a bit of a loner, spending time by myself in the RV or on the mountain when I'm not with Steve. So when you say Bigfoot, it reminds me of my RV lifestyle, but it also reminds me of my brother because he had a business called Bigfoot as well. He's only got one leg, and yes, his 1 foot is very big. And so he called his business Bigfoot as well, taking people on bike adventures and really inspiring them that they can do anything. Bigfoot comes up a lot, and I'm actually in Oregon right now, and every gift store you go into has Bigfoot stickers, Bigfoot, little toys and things. So that's a great memory, Blake. Thanks for bringing that up.
How much has living in an RV, at least let's call it a quarter to half of the time in the last 20 years, taught you about how much you need versus how much a lot of people think they actually need?
Well, let me correct you on that, Blake. I think it's about 10 and a half months a year I live in an RV. So I live in an RV when I'm
I
up
didn't
in
know
Alaska.
exactly, but I didn't want to overshoot. I was being generous. I expected it was more than that, but I wasn't quite sure. So I wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt.
I got exposed to van life at a younger age than most.
Long before it was cool.
Long before it was cool, when they were like, you can end up in a van down by the river. And now it's like, oh my gosh, you need a lot of money to be in that van to live down by the river. I remember when I got my first van, my dad was so upset. He's like, oh my gosh, you've become this nomad van living person. And took about 10 years later and he bought his first van. And my mum and dad went to the van lifestyle. My brother's actually living in a van right now down the mountains when he's not at home. So things have changed in terms of that van lifestyle. But my husband and I, we spend about 10 to 11 months a year living in RVs. And I love it. It really gives you so much freedom. It allows you to live in different locations. You don't just have to choose a town, buy a house, and that's the location you're in for a period of time. We can change. And it's something that really worked well as a wind lover because we're chasing conditions all the time. If it's not windy right here, we're going to be driving 100 miles down the road where it is windy. And so we're really chasing the right conditions for our wind sports and our snow sports. And I also love the challenge. I love the challenge of figuring out how to live outside our comfort zone. And that's something that people talk about a lot, getting outside your comfort zone. And that's something I've been working with for a long time because when we're up in Alaska for 3 months a year, I'm living in an RV. Now, not a lot of people do the winter RVing thing. That's a whole nother level because you can't have running water through the RV or the pipes are going to freeze. You can't run your heat at night because your battery's going to go flat and you're going to run out of propane, and then you're going to have to drive a long way to the nearest town to fill it back up again. So it really gets you acclimatized to the weather that you're in. And so if you're living in an RV without heat at night, well, when you get up in the morning and you go outside ready for your adventure, you're ready to go. Anyone who steps out of their warm hotel room or warm house with the heater blaring is going to freeze when they go outside. So I love that the RV is acclimatizing me. It's putting me in the right location. It's getting me outside my comfort zone. And it really makes life simple. you can't have a lot of stuff with you. Really, the same amount of stuff that I can travel between Australia and the US in my luggage is the same amount of stuff that I live with full time. So it really simplifies your life. You figure out what you can live without and what you really need. You tend to have your favorites of things that you can't live without, that you need to travel with. And it keeps you actually neat and tidy, which I love. I believe that a neat and tidy environment in where our house or where we're living helps have clarity in our mindset as well. And that's something, again, my dad taught me when we would live on boats. Yachties are the same way. You've got to have everything neat and tidy. You've got to have a spot for everything. My dad, before we would head out to sea or we'd head out to sail, he would say, stow to lean, because as soon as he would put that sail up, you knew that the whole boat was going to lean. If you left something on a shelf, it was going to slide off, right? So I do the same thing in my RV. Before we take off to drive, I'm like, okay, stow to lean, because everything's going to be moving around. And you've got to put stuff away or you're going to be breaking stuff for sure.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the neat and tidy thing. I think there's a study on knowledge workers that even the like visual clutter behind your desk or on your desk can have a significant impact in the fidelity of your work. So it's definitely something that I resonate with and holds true in my life for sure. If I'm not cleaning up something around the house before I get my day started, I know you probably can't tell from the way that the house looks right now, but it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like it helps me come into land and make sure that it sets my day as long as everything's sort of all neat and tidy. One thing that I've sort of come to embrace lately is the importance of seasonality in life. You can't give 100% to everything all the time. It's just not possible logistically or theoretically. I don't think it works either way. What is this season of life about for you?
That's another great question, Blake. Seasonal work, seasonal play, and what season are we actually in? That's something that's played a big part in my life. As an Australian who loves to ski, when I started traveling to the US, I would spend the winters here and ski and be with my husband. But I also still had some work and family and friends back home. And so I'd fly back to Australia and it would be winter again. And I think for about 15 or 16 years, I went from winter to winter to winter. I had a little bit of spring on the end of both, but I don't think I ever had an autumn or fall for about 15 years. And so that was something I thought about a lot. And not everybody can go back to back winters all year round. And eventually my husband sort of invited some more balance in my life. When we really started getting into the kite surfing world, we discovered that we wanted to spend some time at the ocean and be in the windy places with some good waves to ride at certain times of the year. So we really started enjoying those spring and into summer months as well. And so I think that brought a bit more balance into our life of experiencing all the seasons. I love that I get to experience extreme winters up in Alaska. Some winters like in Australia are not the same as Alaska, and I get to go back home and spend some summers in Australia, which are beautiful white beaches and bikinis and hot times as well. And again, having that comfort range of temperatures has been a big deal in my life, trying to expand my temperature range as well. But the season that I'm in right now, if we want to get a little bit more philosophy into it, I'm in the season of being over 50 and getting into this new season of life where I've had a couple of injuries, I've had a couple of health issues, and really thinking about when is the time in our life when maybe an injury has stopped us doing our favorite extreme sport, maybe an illness has, or is it going to be age that puts a stop to our lifestyle and our extreme sports? And everyone, like my mum's going through it with the aging. I've got friends who have injured themselves that don't allow that. And I'm going through that season of decision making myself right now and trying to figure out how I can pivot my passions in order to live an ageless lifestyle and have this energy all year round, because it's so easy to get depressed when we can't do what we really want to do in life. And I don't want to have that season of depression in my future. And so I think planning for our future and expanding our passions into multiple aspects so that we can sustain them for as long as possible is so important. I used to be inspired by these Red Bull athletes, the extreme Olympians that are doing all these incredible sports that we all look up to. Now I'm more inspired by the 70 and 80-year-olds who are still out there doing their sports and having a great time and really showing and setting the example that they've looked after their body, they're eating well, they've got the right mindset, and they're able to have longevity in their sport. So that's the season that I'm in right now.
I think an important note there as we talk about getting into the back half of your life and still making sure that you're able to keep up with everything that you would hope to be doing in the later decades of your life, it would behoove me not to ask who the Wind Warriors are.
The Wind Warriors. Well, Wind Warriors are a group of girls, right? Wind Warriors is there's the specific Wind Warriors as a team of girls that we are planning to cross Greenland using a kite. But Wind Warriors is also a term that I use when I'm teaching at the elementary schools, and I'm teaching those kids about wind power and the joy of flying kites and teaching them to make kites, because I really feel like I'm sharing my passion with the next generation of Wind Warriors. And so I see Wind Warriors as a term that I use for anyone who's really into wind sports, those wind lovers. There's a lot of people out there who don't like wind. It messes up their hair. It's noisy. I say to my mum, how's your day go? Oh, it's a terrible day. It's windy outside. Where if you speak to a wind warrior, if it's windy outside, they're excited because they're going to go out and do their sport. And so that terminology of somebody who really fights for the joy of wind and shares their love of wind with others was a name I came up with when we were naming our team of badass women who love to kite, that really want to make a difference in this world of spreading knowledge about climate change, spreading knowledge about the joys of wind, and also showing that a group of women can do something as extreme as crossing Greenland in negative 30 temperatures, in extreme high winds, and filming a documentary all about the weather in Greenland and how it's really affecting our planet. So Wind Warriors is a great name, and it's actually going to be the name of my second book in my children's book series as well.
Talk to me about the logistics that go into planning a trip across Greenland.
The logistics for planning a trip across Greenland, they're huge. There's so many skills that you need to add to your quiver of experience, and there's so much to think about. It's something that's been done before, and in fact, one of the biggest decisions was making sure that we had a guide that had experience, and this incredible woman, Camilla, who has done it 8 times. She is really the pinnacle of Greenland guides, and to have a female guide as well, we were so excited about. I've known of Camilla for many, many years, and she's always been a huge inspiration to me in my sport, and working with Camilla over the last year and a half and having these conversations and learning from her has been invaluable. Having a guide is probably the most important thing because she's done it before, she knows where to go, and she has a good team behind her as well. It's not just one person. Her father used to be in I think it was the Army or the Navy, and he was a master forecaster. So she's in contact with him every day, and his forecasting skills for Greenland are incredible. He'll actually know what size kite we're going to need today, and at 2:00 you're going to need to change size because the wind is going to go to a different speed. So having that sort of knowledge that comes with Camilla is invaluable. The things that is going to make this trip a lot harder than some of the other clients that Camilla has taken is that we're wanting to film as well. And it's a big enough challenge as it is just to achieve 45 days living on an ice cap, living in a tent. If you think roughing it in an RV in the wintertime is tough, how about a tent, right? Where you've got to set it up every night. You've got to carry your own food and cooking equipment and fuel and everything you need with you for 45 days. So you're flying your kite with your skis on and you're towing a sled behind you, which is a new skill for me that I've been practicing the last winter. You've got this big heavy load behind you. It's like a bit of an anchor. Some new skills needed to be learnt by all of us. And for me, I had the ski skills, I had the backcountry skills, and I had the kite flying skills. But the cold weather camping, dealing with cold weather, being in a tent and towing all my gear is something that I've really spent a lot of time researching, learning, interviewing other Arctic explorers that use kites, and learning from them has been a huge learning experience and something I've enjoyed a lot. And some of the other girls have some incredible experiences. Daphne has summited Everest, and she's really a go-getter. I believe that girl can do anything, but she also hasn't been kiting for that long. So some of these girls have got a few years experience with a kite, and in fact that's why they invited me on the team as a kite coach, kite instructor, and the queen of kite mares, they call me. Kite mare is where you get all your lines tangled and in a mess, and if you haven't done it before, it can take you hours to untangle that mess, whereas the queen of kite mares, I can do it very, very quickly because I've done it so many times. So really having a team of girls and having the right skill set with everybody in the team and working as a team is so important. So there's a lot of meetings going on, and we meet once a week, meeting with producers of the documentary and figuring out the logistics of how we're going to charge batteries for our cameras out there. Can we bring a filmer with us? And do they have Arctic experience to survive in the cold weather? Can they keep up with us? Because we're going to be flying at kites and moving at quite a speed. So the person who's going to be doing the filming needs to be an expert snow kiter, Arctic explorer, and documentary filmer up to the standard of the Disney Channel or National Geographic. So there are very few people in the world that can do that. And we're looking for a female, a girl, to do it as well. So there's a lot of logistics that we've figured out and a lot that we're still figuring out, Blake.
A lot of this, like you mentioned, is to sort of raise awareness for a lot of things that are happening climate-wise right now. You've been going to Alaska for over 20 years now. What are some of the biggest changes in environment that you've seen from the start of your 2 decades there until now?
I get a great view of the climate changing, and Alaska and all of these sort of Arctic environments like Greenland, Antarctica, Alaska, we're able to see these changes with our own eyes. And over those 20 years, I've seen the glaciers change a lot. We're seeing the glaciers carve off huge pieces. We're seeing the mountains, weather's changing. Back 20 years ago, the heli-ski season wouldn't start until about mid-March because it was too stormy, until mid-March when the days became a little bit longer and more blue skies. Now the heli season starts in early February, so it's moved a whole month earlier because the weather has changed, and it ends a lot sooner as well because the temperatures are getting warmer. So we're seeing it affecting businesses, we're seeing it affecting the glaciers especially, and I love to spend a lot of time around the glaciers when I'm not snow kiting and working up the mountains. I'm taking people out into these glacial ice caves and really spending a lot of time around those glaciers, and I get to see some incredible situations. In fact, this year I wanted to check out this ice cave that a few people had told me about, and we went to explore it late in April. I probably, made a few mistakes that day of going too late in the day. My human factor, the excitement of going there, overtook the red flags of, hey, it was late in the season. Yes, it was warm. Yes, we were a little bit late in that day by the time we'd finished what we had to do before we went on this personal adventure. And as we exited this glacial cave, the whole front of the glacier carved off right behind my husband. I have this view of my husband running as this huge piece of ice fell behind him. It was like watching an Indiana Jones movie in real life, you know, when he's running from that big boulder chasing him. And it was an incredible experience, and I'm so grateful that we were okay. But 30 seconds earlier, we were inside that cave. And so it really made me super aware of how things aren't as safe as they seem sometimes, and how quickly things are changing for sure.
We'll change it to life 7 out of 9 instead of 6.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But then also, I'm lucky to spend time in Australia. And as I mentioned, my mum and dad had a ski shop when I was born, you know, about 50 years ago. And as a kid, I remember going down there and there was so much snow and it was up to my waist. And yes, I was shorter back then. But that being said, the seasons were much longer. Now in Australia, it'll be one of the first continents to lose their snow in the ski resorts. And now, you know, snowmaking, man-made snow is the only way those resorts are staying open in the shoulder seasons. Australia is really showing me as a skier how much the climate is changing down there as well.
Yeah, I think we maybe had 2 weeks with natural snow. Not that Ontario is known as the ski capital of the world, but I think there was probably, our ski season last year was maybe 2 weeks of natural snow, and then it was all man-made snow, and even that didn't stick around for long. There were muddy runs, and that was about it for our ski season last year. I don't remember longer than a 2-week stretch where it was below freezing for the entire time. So
yeah, the weather's definitely changing. And as a weather lover and wind lover, it's quite exciting to watch all of the different natural events that are happening around the world, the floods, the tornadoes, the hurricanes, the wind, too much snow, lack of snow. There's a lot of changes going on, and it's amazing for us to watch in our generation, and also making some personal changes to the way we do things in order to try and slow that down. Fingers crossed.
what makes Valdez the best spot in Alaska for snow kiting?
Wow, I love this question because we're talking about my favorite thing of snow kiting. And Valdez is definitely one of the world-class places to go snow kiting. And the main reason behind that is a couple of things. One, Valdez is lower altitude and we're quite close to the ocean. So we get that great wind flow. Now in Thompson Pass, you've got mountains going up both sides of the road, and the wind funnels through that valley in both directions. So we get to kite on both the north wind flow and the south wind flow. And then there's another valley that runs east to west. So there's multiple locations that we can go snow kiting on all of the different wind directions. And anyone into wind sports knows that location choice is the most important thing. And some locations will only work in one wind direction. And you might have to go miles and miles to find another one. So to be in Thompson Pass and be able to utilize all the different wind directions is fantastic. You can also vary in wind speeds as well. So if you're learning and you want less wind, you can go to one location down on the lake where the wind disperses and gives us a slightly lower wind speed, and that's going to suit those beginners. Or we can go down the road to a spot where the wind gets funneled and it's a higher wind speed. So we can really choose location based on wind speed and direction. But the thing that makes it world class, because there's lots of different snow kiting locations around the world, is the slope angle to wind angle. And what I mean by that is that the mountains are going up from the road. And if that wind was blowing up the mountain, it would allow us to use the kite to get to the top. But we'd put our kite down and pack it up, and then we'd ski down without the kite in our hand. But in Thompson Pass, we get this side slope wind angle, which allows us to go up and down the mountain, leaving our kite in the air, very much like a kite surfer. I'm at a secret location here on the Oregon coast right now, which has a great wave angle to wind angle. We want like a side shore wind or side off in order to ride those waves with our kite in the sky. And Thompson Pass, Alaska, near Valdez, gives us that same epic wind angle to slope angle to allow us to use our kites like our own personal rope tow, going up and down and up and down and up and down. We can seriously get thousands and thousands of vertical feet in a day, probably more than you could in a ski resort riding a chairlift all day. It's really, really fun and so amazing as a skier to be self-sufficient out there in the mountains and not have to hike like a backcountry skier, using the wind power to get us up the mountain in 15 minutes where it might take you 4 hours to hike up there.
Talk to me about safety in the backcountry. Obviously, I know this is a big part of a lot of the programs that you put together. Where you are in Valdez is about a 45-minute helicopter ride from Anchorage. Is there a part in the back of your mind that you know if things really go sideways that is part of the calculation? Or is it just that we need to be obviously well and truly prepared for everything ahead of that, and that is like a non-factor? How do you think about all of these things as they play into how we're making sure that we're staying safe in some of these more extreme environments?
Safety is key whenever we're doing extreme sports, and being prepared with our own safety equipment and knowledge are probably the two key things that we need to be prepared for. So we can gain that knowledge by doing avalanche courses, wilderness first aid courses. We don't have ski patrol going to come to our rescue out there in the backcountry. So we really have to have a lot of those same skills that a ski patroller would. And so keeping up with that training too, because that training will expire. You will forget it. So that's why every 2 years we need to do our wilderness first aid. We need to go off and keep our avalanche training up to date. And they're always introducing new information from avalanches that have happened around the world so that we can continue learning and having that knowledge. So building up that knowledge, also having the gear. What's in your backpack? A lot of people head out there, oh, that backpack's pretty heavy, I'll just leave this behind, leave that behind. But really, we need to be fit enough to wear a backpack that we've got a beacon, shovel, probe in there, a first aid kit, water, something to keep warm, an extra puffy jacket. I actually carry an extra puffy jacket in a men's extra large, so that if somebody gets hurt, I've got something that's going to fit them. If I have a women's size jacket, that's not going to help them at all. I'm going to have the smallest thermarest that I can get to fit in my backpack, because getting somebody off the snow so they don't get hypothermia is going to be worth the effort of carrying that we can put them on a thermarest if somebody gets injured, because we might have to wait 45 minutes for that helicopter, and 45 minutes is actually really short. In Greenland, if we get injured, we could be days before you get rescued. So I think having an option of a helicopter, and especially if it's during heli season, there are a lot of helicopters around that will stop everything they're doing in order to rescue somebody that's in real trouble, is an advantage in that area. Having the knowledge, forecasting knowledge, to check every day the weather forecast. What's the wind doing? What's the snow doing? What's the temperature doing? What is the avalanche danger? So being a bit of a nerdy weather forecaster, right, amateur meteorologist, is also a key sort of to have a passion for that, so that you're collecting that daily knowledge of, should I be heading back in by lunchtime because there's a storm coming in, or is it getting too warm that glacier might carve behind me? And if I'm out snow kiting, is the wind going to die when I'm miles away from the road and I have to walk back? And do I have my skins, some way of traveling in the backcountry? A lot of snow kiters, they might be great skiers and snowboarders in resort, and they might be excellent kiteboarders or kite surfers in the summer, but if they don't have that backcountry knowledge and skills, they're not going to be carrying that backpack with all their gear in. And those are the guys that actually get into trouble because they're overconfident with some of their skills. So as I mentioned, doing the training, forecasting, gear, and then having a plan for every scenario is also key. Where's our entry and where's our exit? What's our exit plan if something goes wrong? Or how can we get out of that area? Do we have a snowmobile, or they call them snow machines up in Alaska? Do we have enough fuel? Do we have the right snow surface? Right. And that's where the knowledge from the avalanche classes are going to come in. And when we get to our location, I like to teach people in my classes the word flow, because we want to forecast. F stands for forecasting, and you can do that even before you leave your house or your RV in the morning. And then the L stands for location. Which location is going to be best for doing your sport or activity? And when we think about location, even for skiing or snowboarding, which aspect on the mountain is the right location to ride depending on the snowpack? O stands for observations. And so once we get to our location, and this needs to be something you're constantly doing, is being observant. O for observations. We're looking for red flags. Do we see any dangers out there? Is there some pooling of water on top of the frozen lake? Do we see some evidence of avalanches that have happened on a similar slope that we're going to be skiing? Do we see some clouds, dark clouds coming in the distance? So being observant is really important. And then the W in flow stands for wind and weather, which again is constantly changing, and we need to be constantly be observing that wind and weather all day.
You talk about any sort of helicopter willing to be able to drop whatever they're doing and come to the rescue at any point in time. Obviously, there's going back to the human factor that you're talking about. That's maybe a different version of human factor. And I know this from my friends that just moved out west, is that there's a huge community aspect to this. And the skiing community and the kiting community and the sports community, how big of a factor is that for you that has kept you in doing this so long?
The community of our sports is incredible. And I think it's, if you're passionate about something and you meet somebody else who's also passionate about the same thing, you're instantly going to have a connection, because you're going to want to talk about your passion. When I'm hanging out with my mum, she's passionate about dogs, and most of it, I can't keep track of those conversations when she and her doggy friends are talking about dogs. But skiers and athletes and kiters, we're all having a great time together because we're like-minded. We've got similar passions. We're sharing experience. We're sharing knowledge. And the more we can actually talk to people, the more knowledge we can actually absorb. We can know something, but if we speak to somebody else and we can learn their knowledge as well, we're both going to be better off by having those conversations. So community is huge. I love the community up in Alaska, and I'm so grateful that my husband's still a heli-ski guide to this day, and I get to communicate with those guides. And every day I'm like, what did you see out there? What did you see out there? And that's going to be knowledge that I can get that my friend who's not married to a heli-ski guide can't get. So I'm going to bring that knowledge to the car park, and I'm going to tell everybody what they've said in the morning in order to share that knowledge with people. So we're constantly asking questions, sharing knowledge, and I've got some great friends for life that I respect and I really enjoy seeing. And sometimes I only see them a certain season of the year, and that makes it even more special.
A big part of what you do now is teaching all of these sports that we've been talking about. What's the most rewarding part of teaching for you?
Teaching is something that I love to do. I believe we should all be sharing our stories, our adventures, our passions with others. And I'm so grateful that at the age of 14, my parents sent me to Thredbo to learn how to be a ski instructor. They thought it would improve my skiing. It would introduce me to a community of like-minded people when I was having a really hard time with my brother having cancer and going through all that time. So I learned to teach, and sharing with others something that I love so much is something I get huge joy out of, seeing them go from that person who's scared and wanting to do something but needing to find the courage, needing to find someone who's prepared to hold their hand or give their knowledge to them, and watching them be empowered, especially by wind power. That's an amazing one. Watching especially women become empowered by flying a kite out there in the ocean or on the mountains is so rewarding to me. I get so much joy. And from the last 15 years, I've been a qualified kite instructor, ski instructor, backcountry guide, and sharing my knowledge in all of these areas. And it's been so rewarding. And lately, I've actually started sharing my knowledge with the next generation of wind warriors. I've been going to elementary schools and sharing these lessons of wind and safety and kites with kids aged from about 5 or 6 up to about 10 or 11. And that has been so rewarding for me because I discovered that it's not just about the extreme sport, that these lessons of overcoming fear in our sport relate to other areas of life. And after I taught one of the school classes this year in Valdez, I was at the supermarket wearing my hoodie that says, "I love kites." And so this lady came up to me and said, "Oh, you must be the lady who did the kite class today. My daughter was in your class. I really needed to share something with you." I said, "Sure, I'd love to hear." And she said that her daughter had been going through a really tough time. And she'd picked her up from school every day this week and she'd been in tears. But today she picked up her daughter and the little girl ran up to the car flying a kite with the biggest smile on her face. She had so much joy. And to hear this mother telling me this, boy, it made everything I'm doing so worth it. And I was so grateful to have this opportunity to share with these kids because they got joy out of it. It got them outdoors flying a kite instead of just going indoors and playing video games. They wanted to go outside, which is, again, an incredible lesson. So I think that teaching people and sharing the lessons that I've learned is going to be what I spend a lot of my future this next season doing because it's so rewarding. And to see kids getting joy in life, flying a kite is something I get so much joy out of too.
I have one final question that I like to ask all my guests, and that's, what's the last opinion or belief that you changed your mind about?
Boy, that's a good one, Blake. You've had a lot of great questions. Can you just repeat that one more time for me?
What's the last opinion or belief that you changed your mind about?
Boy, normally you can't shut me up, and I've got an answer for everything. But that one's a toughie. I love it, Blake. Oh, I could go down many different rabbit holes here, but the thing that I've changed my opinion or belief on lately is that I won't be able to do my extreme sports for the rest of my life. My belief is that I'll need to pivot my passion, and that can be a hard thing to come to terms with because you love something so much, you want to do it forever, but age, injury, or illness is going to require us to pivot our passions. And I believe that the earlier we can start planning for that in life and having a variety of hobbies and having a plan for our aging years, the more prepared we'll be. It won't come as such as a shock. And I'm so grateful that in this time for me, I'm really pivoting my passion, as I've mentioned, from doing my extreme sports and competing and doing all these incredible adventures, which are giving me stories to tell for years to come, and teaching my skills and sharing my passion with these extreme athletes, these skiers and these snowboarders. I'm now pivoting that passion into sharing my love of kites and wind with younger people, and I'll be able to go and teach those kids at schools for many years to come. And I'm now writing a series of children's books, Blake, which are all about kites. The first one's called Gale and the Red Kite of Courage, which talks about my brother losing his leg to cancer and him gifting me my first red kite. And that kite changed my life. It brought me so much joy. And here I am all these years later, still sharing that lesson that I learned way back then about the joy of flying a kite. And I think that those books will be a legacy for me teach kids for years and years to come some of the lessons and telling these stories that I've got. So the belief that we have to pivot our passions, and we need to prepare for that, like we do need to prepare for any big adventure or any backcountry mission, is really the same in life.
Jennie, this has been fantastic. If we want to send people to find more about you online, where should they go?
If anyone would like to learn more about snow kiting, learning to snow kite, reading some of the children's books I'm writing, or invite me to speak at an event, I would love to hear from you. You can find me on social media under Adrenajen. It's like Adrenaline Jen. Adrenajen on Facebook, Instagram. I've got a website, and you can also learn more about my first children's book, which is called Gale and the Red Kite.
Jennie, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Blake, thank you so much for having me. You're a great interviewer. You've had some incredible questions. I've loved your style of podcast, and I hope I've had some stories that are going to educate and entertain your listeners. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity. Thank you so much.